Marlon Brando was lying on the ground in the forum scene of Julius Caesar, completely motionless. Joseph Mankiewicz shouted, "Cut!" But Brando didn't get up. When the set nurse checked his pulse, her face turned pale and she whispered, "This man's heart rate is 35 beats per minute. We have to take him to the hospital." Mankiewicz panicked. The crew gathered in a circle, and just as they were about to call an ambulance, Brando's lips moved. What happened next became one of the most controversial moments in Hollywood history and changed Shakespearean cinema forever. It was the middle of summer 1953 at MGM Studios in Culver City, California. Brando was only 29, but he was already a legend. A streetcar named Desire had made him a star, and method acting had elevated him to godlike status. Now Joseph Mankiewicz, one of Hollywood's most respected directors, wanted him in Shakespeare's most famous tragedy. But he had given Brando a small role, Caesar's corpse. It seemed insignificant, just a few minutes on screen. No movement, no lines, just lying on the ground. Brando had accepted the role because death is a performance, he had said. No one understood what he meant. Until that day, the forum scene was being filmed. John Gielgud, the legend of British theatre, was delivering his Friends, Romans, Countrymen speech as Marcus Antonius. James Mason was Brutus, Edmund O'Brien was Casca, Greer Garson was Calpurnia. The biggest names in Hollywood and London were on the same stage. But there was something on that stage that no one knew. Marlon Brando wasn't just lying on the ground. He was dying. He was truly dying. Because that morning, Brando had made a decision he hadn't told anyone. He wouldn't just play Caesar's death, he would live it. And to live it, he first had to die. That morning, 3 hours before filming began, Brando locked himself in an empty room at the studio. He had given his assistant clear instructions. No one is to enter. No one. Inside the room was a mat, a candle, and complete silence. Brando lay down on the mat, closed his eyes, and began to breathe. But not normally. Rather, in a controlled, slow, deep manner. He took 12 breaths per minute, half of what a normal person would take. He had learned this technique from Indian yoga masters, pranayama, breath control. But Brando wasn't using this just for meditation. He was using it as a tool to slow down his body, lower his metabolism, almost stop life. Because he wasn't going to play Caesar that day. He was going to experience Caesar's death. Brando was a master of method acting, but this was more than just emotional memory. Lee Strasberg had trained him at the Actors Studio. Don't play the character from the outside in, live it from the inside out. But Brando had gone one step further. He didn't just live the character, he lived the character's physical reality. If the character was angry, Brando's blood pressure would rise. If the character was afraid, Brando's adrenaline would increase. And if the character was dying, Brando had to die too. At least his body had to believe it. So he lay in that room for 3 hours, slowing his breathing, lowering his heart rate, reducing his body temperature. When the set nurse came to check on him, she was shocked. "Mr. Brando, your pulse is very low. Are you feeling okay?" Brando replied without opening his eyes. "Caesar is dying. So am I." The nurse left anxiously, but she couldn't stop Brando. Because Brando was unstoppable. When filming began, no one knew what would happen. The forum scene was a massive set construction, ancient Roman architecture, marble columns, a crowd of extras, hundreds of costumes. Mankiewicz was a perfectionist. Every detail had to be flawless. When Brando arrived on set, he was dressed as Caesar, white toga, gold leaves, makeup showing bloody wounds. But Brando's face was strange, pale, tired, as if he were truly ill. The makeup department was concerned. "Marlon, we need to give your face more color. You look too pale." Brando shook his head. No, Caesar is dying. He should be pale. Mankiewicz explained the scene. Marlon, you'll lie on the ground, motionless. John and James will talk over you. Your only job is to be there. Simple. Brando listened quietly. But he had another plan in mind. The camera started rolling. Brando lay down on the ground, in the middle of the forum, Caesar's corpse. Gielgud began his speech, in that famous English accent, with theatrical gestures. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The words were powerful, the performance magnificent. But there was something the camera didn't see. Brando's chest wasn't moving. He wasn't breathing, or he was breathing so very slowly that it wasn't visible. His eyes were closed, his face completely relaxed, his lips slightly parted. He looked like a real corpse. Gielgud glanced at Brando while speaking and felt a strange sensation. This wasn't just acting, it was something else. But he continued. The scene lasted 6 minutes. It was a perfect take. Mankiewicz called cut, and everyone waited for Brando to get up. For the first 10 seconds, no one was concerned. Brando might have been tired, maybe resting. But 30 seconds passed, a minute passed, and Brando was still lying on the floor. Mankiewicz called out through the microphone, Marlon, okay, we're done. You can get up. No response. Gielgud bent down, touched Brando's shoulder. Marlon, it's okay. We're done. No reaction. James Mason approached, anxiously. Someone call a doctor. This man may have fainted. The set nurse came running, checked Brando's pulse on his wrist. Her face changed. Mr. Mankiewicz, this is serious. His pulse is 35 beats per minute. That's dangerous for a normal person. He's either lost consciousness or... Mankiewicz interrupted. Or what? The nurse hesitated. Or he's going into deep hypothermia. His body temperature is dropping. Panic spread. The crew gathered around Brando. Someone brought a blanket. Someone brought water. Someone wanted to call an ambulance. But Mankiewicz noticed something. Brando's lips were moving very slightly. He wasn't talking, but he was breathing very slowly, almost imperceptibly slowly. Stop, said Mankiewicz. Don't touch him. He's doing something. Gielgud looked stunned. What is he doing? The man is dying. Mankiewicz shook his head. No, he's doing death, but I don't know how. Brando's lips moved, and he whispered in a very soft, almost inaudible voice. Caesar isn't dead yet. The crew froze. Mankiewicz leaned in. Marlon, what are you saying? Brando whispered again, this time a little clearer. Not the moment of death, the process. Caesar is slowly going. I must go too. Mankiewicz began to understand. Are you in character? Are you still Caesar? Brando didn't answer, but his eyes remained closed, his body motionless. Mankiewicz stood up, looked at the crew. Get the cameras rolling again. Record this. The camera operator protested. But we're not on stage. The shot's over. Mankiewicz ordered sternly. I said record it. This is a documentary moment. We won't miss it. The cameras silently focused on Brando. The crew stepped back, simply watching. And from that moment on, time began to flow differently. 10 minutes passed. 20 minutes. Brando was still lying there. His pulse continued to slow, now 32 beats per minute. The nurse was concerned, but Mankiewicz stopped her. If there's danger, we'll intervene. But right now, he's in control. Brando was indeed in control. But it was a strange kind of control. His body was dying, but his mind was active. It was a technique he had learned in yoga meditation, disconnecting the mind from the body, manually controlling the autonomic system. He was breathing once every 10 seconds, slowing his heart, lowering his body temperature. He was doing something medically impossible. He was dying by his own will. John Gielgud was 60 years old and had been performing all of Shakespeare's works for decades. He was Laurence Olivier's rival, the master of English theater. But that day, at the MGM studio, an American youth was teaching him a lesson beyond words. Gielgud knelt beside Brando, reached out his hand but did not touch him. He just watched. Brando's face was changing, turning from pallid to gray, his lips taking on a bluish tint, purplish circles appearing under his eyes. These were the signs of a real corpse. Gielgud whispered, his voice trembling, "My God, he's really going." And the tears came, because Gielgud understood. Brando wasn't playing Shakespeare, he was crucifying him. James Mason came over, watched silently. "I've been an actor for 40 years, Mason said, his voice hoarse. "I've played hundreds of roles, but I've never seen this. He's discovered something, and it makes all of us amateurs." Mankiewicz was taking notes, sketching on the paper in his hand. "We have to understand this technique," he said. "If Marlon can do this, we're redefining the limits of acting." But the assistant director was worried. "Joe, it's been 40 minutes. What if he doesn't come back?" Mankiewicz paused. He didn't want to think that thought. But it was real. What if Brando couldn't come out of this? What if he had slowed his body down so much that he couldn't bring it back? The movement was small, very small. His eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened. Light hit his eyes, and Brando squinted. His breathing deepened, his chest began to move more noticeably. His pulse quickened, 35, 40, 45. The nurse breathed a sigh of relief. "He's coming back." Brando moistened his lips. His mouth was parched. He whispered one word. "Water." Someone gave him water, and Brando drank slowly. Then he tried to sit up, but he was dizzy, unsteady. Gielgud and Mason helped him, lifting him to his feet. Brando looked at the crew, his eyes still cloudy. "How long did it last?" he asked. Mankiewicz replied, 40 minutes, Marlon. 40 minutes. Brando shook his head, smiled slightly. It wasn't enough, but it's a start. The crew was in shock. Brando sat down in a chair, wrapped in a blanket. His body was shaking, not from the cold, but from metabolic shock. The nurse checked him. His body temperature was 35 degrees, when it should have been 37. "Mr. Brando, you need to go to the hospital," said the nurse. Brando shook his head. "No need. I'll be back to normal in a few hours." Mankiewicz sat down next to him. "Marlon, why? Why did you do this?" Brando looked at him, a strange gleam in his eyes. "Because nobody plays death right, Joe. Everyone plays death instantly, dramatically, theatrically. But real death is slow, silent, and nobody wants to see it. I wanted to show it. Caesar didn't just die when he was stabbed. He died over the next few hours, and I compressed those hours into a few minutes." In June 1953, Julius Caesar premiered. Critics were waiting. MGM's big-budget Shakespeare adaptation, the meeting of Gielgud and Brando, Mankiewicz's direction. When the film opened, the first scenes were classic Hollywood Shakespeare, flamboyant, theatrical, loud. But when it came to the forum scene, something changed. As Marcus Antonius spoke, the camera cut to Caesar's corpse. And that corpse's face, it wasn't alive, but it wasn't dead either. It was in between. His skin was gray, his lips bluish, the area under his eyes bruised. The audience was disturbed, because it looked real, not like a stage prop. but like a real corpse. The New York Times critic wrote, "Brando's Caesar is disturbingly convincing. He played a dead man, but he was the most alive thing on our screen." Variety magazine. Brando applied method acting to death, and the result is both fascinating and terrifying. But the most significant reaction came from British critics. The London Times wrote, "The Americans have taught us how to do Shakespeare. Gielgud is theatrical, Brando is realistic, and the realistic one won." This was an earthquake for the British theatre tradition. For centuries, Shakespeare had been performed with pomp, grand gestures, and loud voices. Brando played him with silence, stillness, slow death. And this was more powerful. After Julius Caesar, Hollywood's approach to Shakespeare changed. Laurence Olivier had used a theatrical style in his own films of Hamlet and Richard III. But in the 1960s and beyond, directors turned to Brando's realism. Franco Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet, Roman Polanski's Macbeth, Kenneth Branagh's Henry V, all drew inspiration from Brando's Forum stage. Because Brando had proven Shakespeare's words could be grand, but the performance had to be real. And realism sometimes comes from stillness. Brando himself didn't talk much about that scene. For years, journalists asked, "What did you do in Julius Caesar? What were those 40 minutes?" Brando usually gave evasive answers. "I just lay there." But in the 1970s, he opened up a little more in an intimate interview. "I wanted to learn. How does death feel? What happens when your body shuts down? And I learned. Death is cold, slow, and lonely. But it's also peaceful. Caesar needed to find that peace. I gave him that peace." The interviewer asked, "But wasn't it dangerous? You could have died." Brando smiled. "I could have died, but I didn't. And that taught me something. Acting is about testing limits. If you don't test the limits, you'll never know how far you can go." In 1994, John Gielgud was 90 years old and giving a biographical interview. When he came to his memories of Julius Caesar, his voice trembled. "That day, Marlon Brando taught me a lesson. I learned that acting has no physical limits. For years, I thought acting was about voice, movement, emotion. But Marlon showed me that acting is also about silence, stillness, and death. Those 40 minutes changed my career. In my subsequent roles, I used pauses more. I listened to the silences more. Because Marlon proved, sometimes doing nothing is more powerful than doing everything." Gielgud couldn't hold back his tears. That day, he gave me a gift, the gift of humility. I thought I was a master. But that day, I realized I died as a student. Today, 70 years later, that Forum scene from Julius Caesar is one of the most studied moments in cinema history. It's shown in film schools, analyzed in method acting classes. Because Brando didn't create a technique on that stage, he created a philosophy. Acting isn't just about becoming a character, it's about living every moment of that character, every breath, even their last breath. And sometimes, to live that last breath, you have to risk your own last breath. Brando took that risk, and he won.